Hello, everyone. Alasdair Gold here for the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham as we look back on a very exciting and interesting and controversial in some aspects North London derby. As you are probably already aware, Guesty is still on his travels, so that's why I'm kind of heading up the show. And that also means, again, I am joined by boss of football.london, Lee Wilmot. How you doing, Lee?
I'm very well. Glad to be here again. And another week, here I am again. Anyone who's watching on YouTube and not listening on the various podcast platforms, two things. I apologise massively for it being a red microphone that I'm in today, given the weekend. And yeah, apologise that there's no Tottenham football shirts behind me. I'm in Canary Wharf Towers in the podcast studio, so hopefully things are a little bit more high def in that regard.
It does look a little bit more like you are a proper like radio DJ. You're doing this for charity.
I do have a face for radio, so
that's one for the older kind of viewers. That's got Harry Enfield, isn't it? Harry Enfield in Chums or something like that. Right. You did watch this game, I presume. This wasn't one where you were kind of by the side of a football pitch with your son, watching on your phone in some capacity.
I couldn't not see this one, could I? Really, North London derby. If anyone, even if my wife had made plans, I think I would have changed them. It's Arsenal Tottenham, so yeah, not going to miss this one.
Do you know what? I went there with my normal dread to the Emirates. You know, you just rock up at the front of it. It just kind of makes me shudder because I know what's normally to come. But I must admit, probably from about, it would have been probably after Sonny's second goal, there was a moment where I was kind of like, I'm not actually worried. The Spurs seem to know what they're doing today. And it was a whole different vibe, which we'll kind of get into over this. I should just stress, only because it's happened just moments before we started recording on that. Spurs have announced the signing of Luka Vuskovic, the young 16-year-old who everyone was heralding as the person that was going to take Eric Dyer's place. It's not quite like that. He is going to come in 2 years' time. But the fact that Spurs actually officially announced it shows that, it is what it is. It's a big signing for the future. And he's a very talented young player who will join up in 2025. And to be honest, we're going to talk about in this podcast about the incredible kind of young players that Spurs are assembling now in this squad. And he will only add to that in a couple of years' time. So we will watch on with great interest to see what is happening with him. But I think we have to dive straight into North London derby, really. What was your overriding emotion, let's say at the final whistle? What did you feel?
Yeah, just quite content, I think. Given, as you said, how we've played at the Emirates over the years, only one win at the Emirates since it opened, and I think it's only one other win at Arsenal when it was at Highbury in the Premier League era. So only 2 wins away from home in the North London derby. So I've said it so many times before. I love and loathe the North London derby in equal measure, just because of how exciting and how massive the games are, but how nervous I get watching them, and how much kind of is riding on it as a fan. The whole football tribalism aspect in this country just means you're in it, you're in the whole thing, and the whole day. I was working yesterday morning on the site, and I didn't really get nervous yesterday, which was very strange until about half an hour before kickoff. And then the usual kind of North London derby nerves kicked in. And then, as you say, it was after we equalised the second time, there was nothing. There were no nerves or anything. I was very sure that Spurs would either see out the game for a draw or go and nick a winner. Which is very weird to feel like that in one of those games, particularly away from home. So yeah, content is probably exactly what I was feeling at the end, because Spurs didn't put me through the ringer on a North London derby, really.
Absolutely. I'd go with content, and I think a tinge of disappointment, actually, only because of that late Richarlison kind of deflected effort that just rolled wide. And I think the players were similar. I don't think the players were particularly celebrating afterwards, as they shouldn't really. Let's be honest, it's a draw at the end of the day. But I do think there's a slightly deeper significance to it and what it means to the Postecoglou foundations that he's putting in early on. But I love the fact that they still wanted more from that. And just most of all for me was the sense of Spurs going there, being brave, refusing to be put off this new style of football they're going to play, even with little mistakes. And even Arsenal, I thought, pressed really well early on as well. Obviously, they had a big moment with Gabriel Jesus's shot over the bar off he dispossessed Maddison. But kind of, I felt like they just went, do you know what? We've got a manager who tells us, and they believe this, that if we lose the ball, it's his fault because he wants us to play in this way. It's not our fault. We're not going to get flack for this. The fans aren't going to moan at us. They're going to say, oh, this is how Postecoglou wants them to play. And I think it's such a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. Let's be honest. At Spurs, the burden of kind of being Spursy weighs heavily on Tottenham players. It always has. And that's probably why they've been such an almost team for so long. And Postecoglou, it just feels like the right man at the right time to just take that weight off their shoulders. And I thought we saw a first big example of that yesterday in terms of, I mean, Destiny Doggy, we'll talk about him in a little bit more depth in a mo, but he, for me, epitomised that of someone that had a couple of early wobbles and probably for the second half of the game was one of the best players on the pitch in terms of, he was just dominant. Postecoglou said that. He was dominant down his side of the pitch, and he's up against, for me, one of the best wingers in Europe in Saka. I think he's that good. He's such a terrific player. But as the game wore on, he became less and less of an imposing figure on the encounter. And that was crucial for me. And I mean, I've got some stats from just to show you the stark difference in games. So last year's match, obviously, it's slightly exacerbated by Emerson Royale getting that 62nd minute red card, but I still felt the game itself was heading in this direction anyway. So last year, Spurs had 35% of possession, and they managed 307 passes to Arsenal's 565, and they had 7 shots to Arsenal's 22. This time around, Spurs had more of the possession at the Emirates, 54%. They played more passes than Arsenal, 435 to Arsenal's 370, and they had just as many shots as Arsenal, 13, with 1 less on target. They have 5 shots on target. And when you look at it, Arsenal kind of had to rely on an own goal and a VAR assisted penalty, whereas Spurs scored 2 lovely goals. I'd say both goalkeepers were tested, probably Raya more so with the Johnson one. I felt Vicario made some good saves. I wouldn't say he was like they were incredible saves, whereas I thought Raya's save, albeit from a scuffed Johnson shot, was very good. And obviously, like I say, Gabriel Jesus's big effort was probably a key moment when it could have become 2-0. But
I did think that Vicario's save from Jesus in the first half was a very good save, actually, though.
Yeah, it was a good save. Yeah, I wouldn't say spectacular, but it was a good save. Yeah. And that's a good thing about Vicario. I think we just expect him now to make these good saves. We've got more to talk about Vicario and a certain challenge made on him as well. But yeah, it was again a brave. But actually, let's go to you for this. What did you make of the lineup when it was announced?
Very brave, in particular, to throw Brennan Johnson in for his full debut in a big game against Arsenal, obviously. But yeah, I don't think there was anything other than that. That was the one big call that I think Ange made. You could have made a case for Manor Solomon starting. Yeah, I was just going to say you could have made a case for Manor Solomon starting. You could have made a case for Richarlison starting. I think you and I both had Richarlison in our team that we would have played beforehand, just purely because of what he brought against Sheffield United at the end of the match and kind of deserving his chance and being a little bit of a focal point potentially as well, because you've talked about there how Postecoglou wants them to play out from the back and he'll take responsibility if they make mistakes. And that was epitomised by, I think, one moment in the first half where Vicario kicked it long and the ball just came straight back. Because you're playing Son through the middle, he's not gonna jump higher than Saliba or Gabriel and hold the ball up. Richarlison may have been able to do that. But yeah, yes, we're going to make mistakes passing the ball out from the back, but it's infinitely better to do that, particularly when you see it come off. Yes, there might be 1 occasion, 2 occasions in a match where it doesn't come off. And I think we've seen that in most matches so far this season. There have been Porro's lost the ball a couple of times in matches. Maddison this time for the Gabriel Jesus chance, obviously. They are going to make mistakes here and there, but when things go right, it's very right. We come out striding out with the ball. The fullback can invert, can make up the extra man in midfield, and you're on the attack. And when you've got Kulusevski, Brennan Johnson and his pace, Son with his pace as well, if you can get the ball forward and get out of those situations in 5-10 seconds, you're so far up the pitch and making chances for yourself. It's just so easy on the eye, and just so much better than what we've been used to in the last few years.
It's great. Let's be honest, it's so good compared to the just dirge we were kind of served up. And no one wants to be served up dirge. It was it's like night and day. And honestly, the amount of obviously I was sat next to Kaya, our Arsenal, my Arsenal colleague, Arsenal reporting colleague at football.london, and he you could see it's a different Spurs, and the amount of national journalists that maybe dip in and out of Tottenham coverage, and they were saying to me afterwards, "Oh, wow, that what's that? That's a very different Spurs." It's like, "Oh, yes, it is. It's great. It's like, welcome to our world. We're actually enjoying reporting on the team again." And I think a brave team selection is absolutely what Postecoglou is about. It's just what he does. He really, I think it's a way of kind of showing the players, well, I'm going to make brave decisions. So, why there's no reason you shouldn't play bravely as well, because I'm doing exactly the same. Let's all crack on in this kind of direction. So if people aren't aware of the goals, obviously the first goal, incredibly unfortunate. Saka kind of cut inside, hits a shot that's going wide. Romero shoves the leg out. In any other given day, he blocks that shot. Obviously, it's a North London derby, so the ball hits his leg and flies right inside the right-hand post as well. It looked like Vicario had it covered, even if it had kind of curled that little bit more. But no. Romero's touch knocks it straight inside that post. But then Spurs kind of sweep up the pitch. Good move. It's actually a bit of a longer ball. Maddison kind of knocked it high to Kulusevski down the right. He knocks it into the middle. Brennan Johnson has a good effort, gets at the back post. Johnson's movement, I felt yesterday, was superb. But we'll talk about him a little bit more depth. Johnson's shots blocked, comes back out. Udogie, having recovered from his early little wobbles, heads it into the path of Maddison, who twists and turns Saka, knocks the ball into the centre, and it's a lovely little flick from Son into the far corner. Then we have the penalty incident in the second half. Saka shot, wasn't it? Was it Saka again?
No, it was Ben White.
Ben White, okay. I was so kind of busy looking at the actual handball, I don't think I remember even looking at who had the shot. Obviously, big moment. What did you make of it? Handball, not handball? Should have been a penalty or not?
Probably an unpopular opinion amongst Spurs fans, but as soon as I saw it, I thought it was a penalty. I get the arguments. I understand where people are coming from with, it's so close to him. What else is he supposed to do with his arm? It's just natural when you're sliding out trying to block a shot. That's what's going to happen. You can't always have your arm by your side, etc., etc. I get that. I understand it. But for me, Ben White is going to score that ball. You can make an argument that Yves Bissouma on the line might have made the block behind Romero, but Ben White, for me, is going to score. It's denying a goal, essentially, with Romero's arm. And no matter how you look at it, I personally, I think that's a penalty all day long. It's hit his arm in the box, stopping a goal. So whether it's accidental or on purpose, I think it's a penalty. And I think you wrote it in your talking points afterwards. If that was at the other end, and that was Cristian Romero having a shot that hit Ben White's arm, I would be screaming for a penalty. So in that respect, I think you have to accept that it is a penalty.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same place as you are, to be honest. I can completely understand the view that in the fact that he's kind of lunging in to block an effort, his arms are going to naturally be there. Although it looks unnatural, that is kind of the way his arms are going to be if you're flinging yourself down with your knee on the floor to try and do that. However, absolutely, your arms up in the air, it's stopping the ball heading towards the goal. I think Postecoglou actually was probably the strongest he's ever been on a refereeing decision thus far, and he's not one to really comment on them. And he kind of afterwards was very much saying like he just doesn't understand the handball rule. He
I
just
don't think
doesn't
anyone does.
understand what. Yeah, I don't think anyone does. Like what is, what isn't, and he said, unless we develop defenders with no arms, we're going to this is going to come up in each game. I had Kaya next to me who was insistent that it should have been a red card, which I felt would be probably the harshest red card ever. I was trying to explain, no, I think, there's Bissouma behind him, and it's not a deliberate attempt to stop the ball going towards the goal with his hand either. It was very much just he's got in the way of it and it's hit his arm kind of thing. Yeah, I didn't have too many complaints with it, and I know some Spurs fans will. And I saw Gary Neville afterwards. I saw his quotes, and he was very much saying if he was a defender, he'd be really annoyed. Sorry, defender still playing, he'd be annoyed because that is naturally how your body would go getting into that position. Yeah, I think it was fair, but I think was most important thing in terms of the game and the momentum of the match was that within a minute Spurs went up the other end and scored an equaliser. Obviously, Jorginho had come on for Declan Rice at half-time. I think another little pivotal thing in the game as well.
Yep.
Declan Rice. I would imagine Declan Rice would not have been so slow on the ball in that moment as Jorginho was. I don't know what he was doing. From the moment that Maddison started to run at him, there was a lot of time for him to do anything with that ball other than what he ended up doing with it. But fair play to Maddison. I mean, he said afterwards that he felt that he might not quite be on it yet, having come on. And he might be slightly in a bit of a daydream. And that was what proved to be. And he ran on, and they kind of almost were letting Maddison run as if saying, you have the shot rather than pass it to Son. And he just waited till the perfect moment to slide it into Son's path. And it was a lovely finish from Sonny as well. And I think richly deserved, really. And I actually felt from that point on, Spurs really kind of held the game in their hand. And if anyone was going to score a third, it probably felt like it was going to be them. Saka had that late low shot, didn't he, that Vicario pushed away, that I remember.
Again, I think that's a save you would expect Vicario to make. Yes, it was low, it was in the corner, but I think he had time to get down and push it around the post.
Yeah, I think so. And Richarlison obviously had that late effort. He also had the kind of big deflected looped effort that I actually thought, oh, Ryan's going to take it into his own goal. We're going to have like a Mendes-ish moment, Pedro Mendes moment, but it wasn't.
There was one moment actually, just even before that, where I was screaming at the TV, which will go unnoticed and on the highlights and everything. But Porro got down the right and had Son completely free in the middle, and just didn't get the ball in front of the defender enough, and it went out for a corner. It was blocked out for a corner, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, if that had got where it should have gone, that was three. Son was putting that away for his hat trick.
Yeah, and that was unusual for Porro because his quality has been superb from those kind of positions. And there's also another moment when Kulusevski put Son through, and I think he hit the side netting. So yeah, I felt like Spurs went there and did everything you'd kind of expect Arsenal to do, to be honest, which was the most pleasing thing. And we can't get away from the fact that over the last year or so, a little bit longer, Arsenal have been the more dominant side in North London. They had a season where they challenged for the title. They ultimately fell short, but they strengthened in the summer with, one of the best midfielders out there in Declan Rice for me. And yeah, they had a game in midweek, but it was a game they strolled in the Champions League against PSV. And I had one Arsenal covering journalist, who I won't name, before the game said to me, well, Spurs, surely, the way it sounds like, they're going to play the same way as PSV did, so they're going to absolutely be picked apart and ripped, and destroyed. No, they were not. Wasn't it Paul Merson said before they were going to be humiliated and destroyed or something like that? You can always kind of rely, can't you? When Paul Merson says something, likely the opposite might happen. But yeah, it was a good performance. It was something to build on. And there's loads of little bits and pieces we can delve into. Actually, let's go into the other controversial moment that we kind of hinted at earlier. Eddie Nketiah, 67th minute. Had a bit of a frustrating game in Nketiah. He'd had that one early shot that that Vicario had saved, but didn't really do anything of note. I thought his pressing was quite good in the first half. That's probably the best thing I'd say about his performance. 67th minute, he launches in. I don't think there was any intent to harm or try to catch Vicario. I think it was purely an attempt to block the pass that Vicario was trying to make. However, in doing so, he went absolutely through Vicario with his foot up high because he was trying to block it with his instep, I presume. But most wincingly, when I watched it back, you can see the kind of between his legs, almost like a slight scissors motion, sweeps Vicario's right foot underneath. Had Vicario's foot not been planted, I think we could be looking at a very, very long absence for Vicario and probably a leg break. Did you think that should have been a red card?
Yes. When I saw it, when you see the replay, when it's in real time, it didn't look great at all. It looked like an awful sliding challenge, and then when you see the replays, there's just that moment where, and footballers will probably tell you this is it's just what happens, but there's that moment where he goes to slide in and get the ball, and then once the ball is gone, his foot then comes up, and it becomes far too high for a sliding tackle. Yeah, Premier League footballers may say, "Oh, that's just the kind of that's the motion. You can't control where your foot's going to go, essentially." But it was so high. It could have been really damaging. And I'm really surprised that I don't know what they did in the stadium. But there was nothing on Sky Sports coverage saying that there was a potential red card check at all. I know it normally comes up in stadiums when VAR are having a look at it. So whether they just didn't have a second look at it or whether it was just cast aside really quickly, I don't know. But for me, that is a very dangerous tackle. And as you say, could have broken his leg if he'd made contact. So you see it so often that it's all about intent. Referees work on intent, and you saying, well, you don't think there was any malicious intent there to injure the player? No, there probably wasn't. I don't think Eddie Nketiah is that type of player at all. But the intent was there with his leg high. So just because he didn't make contact, I don't think it should have gone under the radar, essentially. I think we've seen on Sky Sports coverage this morning, Dermot Gallagher said he's a lucky boy. If it had been given as a red card, VAR wouldn't have overturned it. So yeah, I thought it should have been a red card, and I thought VAR should have actually given it a proper look.
Yeah, I thought it should have been a red card. I believe he's going in there to make a block. I don't think he's going in there to even challenge Vicario. I think he's misjudged the fact that Vicario's leg is naturally going to swing in that direction as he hits the pass. However, it doesn't matter if the intention isn't there because it ended up being an out of control, reckless lunge. And thank goodness Vicario, because Vicario's been superb. He's had such a great start to life at Spurs. And just like I say, had his studs even caught in the turf that little bit more, that'd have been him out for a year and a half. I don't know how long he'd be out for something like that, maybe longer. Because it would just think about it. It's horrible.
It's crazy, isn't it? That if Vicario had done what 80% of footballers do and actually thrown himself to the floor, and as if they'd contact had been made, VAR might have actually had a look more at it than they did.
Well, to be fair, contact was made, and he was hurt, and he did go on the floor. He was down for a little while, but I think, from what Dermot Gallagher said today, it was looked at by VAR, and they just felt that the yellow card was sufficient, and it wasn't enough to kind of make him have another look at it, which I find mind-boggling because they took about 36 minutes looking at the Romero kind of moment and for the penalty. We had about, what do we have? Was it 10 minutes? Yeah, it was 10 minutes added time at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt for that, it was just brushed aside that little bit too easily for me. And I don't want any player to get sent off, and I don't want anyone to kind of get punished any more severely than they should. I just felt, and I don't not really want to talk about tackles and challenges in football because I think, especially in a derby, it's part of the full throttle nature of it, and I don't think that's a bad thing in a game. I just felt that this one was too easily cast aside by VAR, and that's the kind of thing they are there for. It's to say, oh, okay, that's And I look across, it was Gusto, wasn't it, in the Chelsea game?
Yep.
Different kind of challenge, but I kind of see real parallels in the two of them of how dangerous both could be. Yes, that one was more of a kind of an ankle height, but honestly, I can't really. I had to watch the replays because I was writing a little article on it earlier, and every time I watched it, I was like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't pressed play." It's the thought of what could have happened that's as bad as what did happen. But yeah, thankfully Vicario all fine, and Eddie Nketiah gets to play another day without any suspension. So looking at the Spurs players through this game, I want to start with the young ones because I felt that this performance was really personified how impressive this young group that Postecoglou is putting together. Let's start with Destiny Doggy because, from what I understand, Gary Neville was giving a little bit of a hard time on Sky back in the studio, which for me I'd understand for the first 15 to 20 minutes, and even for the goal. I felt maybe for the first goal he was a little bit caught on his heels, having had that yellow card after a bit of a late lunge on Saka. But I did also feel that Brennan Johnson kind of ran into his path of where he would have gone into to get closer. From then, I thought he did well. I mean, what did you make of a Doggy's performance overall?
I've loved what I've seen so far this season from him. I think we all knew that he was a talented boy, but we didn't perhaps expect him to hit the ground running like he has. The goal in particular, there's two new players, isn't it? Perhaps not communicating with one another. Brennan Johnson's probably for one of the only times in the first half actually came back and helped him, and probably hindered him in that regard because both of them went with Ben White. I think it was overlapping, gave Saka that space. And as you've said, he is one of the best forward players in Europe at the minute, Bukayo Saka. And if you let him come back onto his left foot and give him that amount of time, he's going to do damage. As it turns out, the shot was actually going wide, and Romero diverted it in. But yeah, Udogie, a really difficult first 15, 20 minutes. And yeah, he was given a torrid time by Saka. He was given a torrid time by Gary Neville on co-commentary duty, thinking that he wasn't up to the task. And there was even talk of Neville suggesting that Ange bring Ben Davies on because of the yellow card and how good Saka is. But it's testament to him in particular, just how easy that second half was for him. We know how good Saka is. Yes, Saka played on Wednesday, but he did come off in the Champions League, didn't play the full 90. There was no need for Saka to be fatigued or anything like that. And it was a walk in the park in the second half for Udogie, really. He wasn't given any problems by Saka whatsoever and just grew into the game after a really difficult spell when people are suggesting that he should come off, don't want to be red carded in a big game like this. I think he was very disciplined and stuck to his guns. And yeah, I'm really excited by what he can do this season. Didn't perhaps get into those midfield positions as much as he would like, but it's away at Arsenal. You can't expect that. He'll have better days going forward than against Arsenal. Yeah, really good performance after a tough 15, 20 minutes. Can't really fault him after that, really. I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, I thought it was really mature. Just a really mature performance that, as Postecoglou said, would be such a great learning experience for him. He's taken on one of the best, had a few issues, had a few troubles, but kind of learnt in game from it and has just come on so strongly as the game wore on. And like I said, played his part in the build up to the first goal as well. He was not afraid of getting forward. And there was a few moments where you could see him thinking about making a challenge, but he didn't do it. He kind of kept his composure. I was really impressed with the way he reacted. So I was quite surprised when I kind of could see social media saying that he was being hammered by Gary Neville, and I kind of thought that's a very early call within a game. That really is. And yeah, can you imagine what it would have done to his confidence had he brought Ben Davies on after like 25 minutes or so? That'd just been ridiculous. And let's be honest, I like Ben Davies and what he brings to Spurs squad. But Ben Davies up against Saka's pace would have been ridiculous. It wouldn't have worked in that scenario at all. And I felt that was the thing about Udogie. Another young player. Actually, not so young player, but I'm kind of he's only 24, but I'm switching to the other flank now. Pedro Porro, for me, is really going under the radar of just how good a defender he's becoming as well. we're kind of, and myself included, we're kind of quick to praise the attacking things he did. I mean, even earlier I was saying about, his ability to ping a ball into the box and the passes he made. But I think it's kind of going unnoticed by a lot of people what Postecoglou's done with him as a defender. And also huge praise to Porro as well, because he is, how do I put this? He's taken the transition from wing back to right back. Bearing in mind, the first time we saw him do it was against Newcastle United at St James's Park in an absolute destruction of a game. And he's almost a bit like a doggy in a way. He has taken that as the biggest lesson he can have. He's bounced back. And I honestly, I've struggled. Sorry, I haven't given him any marks, I don't think, in my player ratings yet this season that have been below a certain, maybe 8 or 7 at least. He's been so consistently good defensively. And bearing in mind, pre-season, I was giving him a bit of flack because a few of the pre-season goals were coming from his kind of area in the penalty box. But I just think he's tightened up. He didn't really play too much of an attacking role. Doggy was the one maybe getting more forward yesterday. And the other thing that Porro's done really well for me is inverting. When he comes inside into the middle, he looks incredibly comfortable. He looks like a guy that's used to playing as a central midfielder. I just honestly just want to have my little Porro praise moment there, because I do think he's gone under the radar.
Considering I said to you on the podcast last week about the fact that Martinelli's injury might have swayed the decision to play Porro rather than Emerson, who has that bit more capability about him defensively. He was brilliant. I think they all were, to be fair. All 4 of them at the back. I think Cristian Romero had a great game and has got unlucky that he's conceded an own goal and conceded a penalty. So it looks like he's been awful. But for the rest of the kind of the 89 minutes of those 90, I thought he was brilliant. Mickey van der Ven as well. I know you gave him your man of the match in your player ratings. What a talent he is! Just so calm and composed on the ball, and just we haven't even seen a huge amount of his pace yet, which is what he was bought for. He's just in the right position at the right time. He doesn't need to use his pace because he's so disciplined and so just solid in where he is. The back 4, back 5, Vicario, excellent, I thought.
Absolutely. With Van der Ven, he had one of those moments, and sometimes you get them in games. There was one, I hate to go back to the Nuno time, but in the first game against Man City, there was a moment when Japhet Tanganga did a big challenge. I can't remember who it was on that. It might have been Grealish. Grealish had been there then. I can't remember who it was on. But it was a big challenge that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. And for me, on Sunday and yesterday, Van der Ven did a terrific challenge. I think it was Nketiah running through down the left-hand side, and he just matched him for pace, swept in with this sliding challenge. It just, for me, just showed him probably and the rest of the back line. It's like, no, we got this. We got this. If they break through, we've got this. We've got the pace to deal with this. And actually, it was the only tackle that Van der Ven needed to make the entire game, which sums up the way he played. And people would always say this about Ledley King, that he didn't actually need to slide in and make many challenges because his reading of the game was so good. And he would have this ability to usher players into less dangerous areas around the penalty box. And that's exactly what Van der Ven did. And I love the moments he does show his pace, funny enough, when he just motors away. It's just that little bit of acceleration where he knows he can get it through a gap. So that's the beauty of the press or beating the press with Spurs, is not only can they pass around it, but they've got someone like Van der Ven who can just suddenly put the afterburners on and sweep it up their own half. He was superb. We talk about Maddison being this incredible bargain buy for Tottenham and how ridiculously well he fits the Postecoglou system. I think Van der Ven is a very close second in how effortlessly he fits the Postecoglou puzzle, as it were. He's just a piece that slides into it so well. He's 22. I never feel as old as when I look at how young players are and how well they do. It always makes me cast my mind back to what I was doing at 22, and I was not playing in a North London derby. Absolutely not. I was probably doing something utterly wasteful with my time.
These players are going to go under the radar this season as well. But you only need to see, you only need to see the Sky Sports coverage beforehand, and everyone talking, as they will do, about Maddison, about Brennan Johnson making his debut, about Bissouma's resurgence in the middle of the pitch, and it was Les Ferdinand with Jamie Redknapp at the game, and just saying they would just worry about the defence. Spurs have got everything going forward, but the defence is perhaps a little bit young and naive, and perhaps won't be able to cope. But I think they showed on Arsenal, and these people aren't going to watch Spurs every week like we do. Apart from that game where I was with my son, grassroots, obviously. They're not going to watch them, and they're not going to see what these defenders do on a regular basis. They're only going to see highlights, and they're only going to see them make little mistakes because Ange Postecoglou is asking them to play out from the back, and they are all four of them excellent, and have started the season excellently as well. So yeah, they are going to go under the radar, and yes, so much the better for it, I think.
Absolutely. From what I understand, some of the foreign broadcasters, because there were a lot of broadcasters, I think it was maybe about 17, 18 TV interviews that Spurs had to were committed to doing after the game, which is just ridiculous. And from what I understand, I think a few of them were trying to almost sell Spurs players on already. And there was like some comments about some of the players being able to, play at Man City or Real Madrid and stuff to Postecoglou, which I'm sure he treated with the utter disdain that deserves. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I love the fact that they're under the radar at the moment. I just kind of felt if Doggy going to this game, there was a little bit more notice. All it takes is someone like Ian Wright mentioned him, didn't he, on something ahead of the game. It's don't just let him be. We don't want you lot to know about these players. And Van de Ven, you can shove in with the Paul Merson category, Tim Sherwood, who didn't he at the start of the season go, he's wooden. He's a wooden player, he's just so it's just like, he's not. He's actually a really kind of elegant player in the way he plays. He actually reminds me of Jan Vertonghen. There's a real kind of side to him where he uses the ball so well. He, like I say, has that turn of pace. He reads the game so well. Yeah, I wouldn't say he's wooden at all. I was watching, there was a couple of moments when Saka was really kind of going at him. Because what happened as well, and this I don't think was made too much of, knowing that Udogie was in a little bit of an issue that he had a yellow card, Van de Ven was often coming across and helping out and being more of a presence in dealing with Saka. And there was a few moments where actually I had Sherwood's wooden kind of quote in my head. And I was watching, I was like, this is the kind of point then where a wooden player would be turned inside out by Saka. Got nowhere near turning him out whatsoever. He was in utter control of the situation each time, and Saka wasn't able to get past him. He had to pass it away. Van de Ven, Romero has the potential and all the traits within those players of being a wonderful partnership at Tottenham Hotspur for years to come. And that's the scary or great thing, I guess, and not scary for other teams, is that you look at it and you look at Vicario. If he continues in this vein that he's going down, he could absolutely be the new number one keeper for years to come. You look at Romero and Van de Ven, they've got such a lovely balance to their partnership. They could be the next, Alderweireld Vertonghen pairing. Look, I know it's 6 games in. It's a very, very early day. It's in its infancy, but you can see the green shoots of something there. And then you've got Udogie and Porro, who have just grown into their roles. And the key thing to sides that want to do anything is having a settled back four and a goalkeeper. And I think Spurs finally might have one in their squad again. Yeah, honestly, it's very exciting. It's very, you can hear it in my voice. I'm actually very excited about it. And as we're at the halfway point in the show, it would seem the perfect time to remind everyone that the Gold Guest Talk Tottenham podcast is sponsored by NordVPN, and you can use the service in a host of different ways to enhance your internet experience. NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, and that means there's no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. It's something I've done many, many a time, use NordVPN around the world to help me out when I've needed to watch shows or watch any sporting event or something that I would have paid for back at home. But for some reason, as soon as you hop across the border, pesky restrictions seem to come into place that stop you watching things that you've actually paid for. So it allows you to set your device to thinking it's back home and you can just watch things whatever you want, really. And also, there's a big element of security to it as well, in that when you log on to public Wi-Fi's, NordVPN can really help you lock down a lot of what you want to lock down on your devices and stop those nasty people taking them anything out of it. And not only that, but the outlay on a NordVPN subscription is cheaper for you in the long run. And that's because you can purchase streaming services or make bookings from other countries at a much cheaper rate. For example, let's say you could book flights from another country rather than booking them from the UK, and that could end up saving you money. So it means you're paying out for Nord, but you are saving money overall. There's a whole host of other benefits from signing up to NordVPN, so why not give it a go? You can grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/goldguest to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So, moving further up the pitch a little bit, another young player, we mentioned him already, Brennan Johnson. Full debut, thrown into a North London derby. I mean, I guess he's a £47.5 million signing, so this is what's going to be expected. What did you make of him?
I felt a bit sorry that he went off injured, actually, because I've been speaking about it to a couple of the Arsenal reporters we got in the office with me today. It was a bit quiet at the start of the first half, but that was to be expected. I think you're away at Arsenal. You expect there to be an onslaught from the home side in a North London derby like that. You don't expect to have perhaps too much of the ball. You don't perhaps expect to be able to get out your own half too much in the first 15, 20 minutes because the home side will be roared on by a vociferous crowd and will be expected to get on the front foot and get ahead early. So yeah, he wasn't involved much early on, but then came into it. Had his big chance, obviously, that he just didn't. He might say he did connect with it well enough. It was a difficult chance. Came at him quickly. He had to kind of move his body to it was just behind him. Had to try and get the shot on target. And had it not been for a brilliant Raya save, would have announced himself as a Tottenham player with a goal in a North London derby. Then had the moment before the Son goal, obviously, had a chance that was saved and he got really involved in a lot of what was going on. Perhaps didn't get to see as much of his pace as we would have liked. But again, we'll see more of that against supposed lesser opposition, I think. And yeah, I was just a bit annoyed really that he picked up the injury because we were the better team in the second half. And I just feel like with his pace and with his ability, we might have carved out a few more chances in that second half if we'd got him on the ball and might have gone on to win. How much did he go off? Maybe 15 minutes into the second half? Was it before the hour mark or just after the hour mark?
It was the 62nd minute he went down.
Yeah, so you look, there's half an hour still to play, and I think he really could have come into his own in that second period. So it was a real shame to see him go off injured because, yeah, I think as gaps might have opened up for him, he could have been crucial to Spurs perhaps taking all 3 points on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll use that word, excited again. I thought it was a really promising display. I really did. Yes, his finishing was a little bit rusty. It wasn't clinical. He had a few opportunities that he maybe could have done a bit better with, and really, even the one that Raya saved superbly was a scuffed effort. It could have been if it had maybe been a better touch, it probably would have put it further into the corner. However, it was his movement that impressed me so much. He covered so much ground. There's no coincidence that he was in that position for that effort because I felt he was constantly kind of pulling White all over the place on the right-hand side. He was constantly here, there, and popping up everywhere. And I did think there were moments where you saw his pace. I think you could see he terrified Arsenal at times when he would suddenly, because you got him and Son running down that side of the pitch. And Maddison, I've noticed, is no slouch either. He's actually got a little bit of a turn to pace of pace to him as well. Yeah, I think what excites me most about Brennan Johnson is 22 years old, and he's just got every bit to his game that I can see Postecoglou just moulding over the years to come. He's got the pace. He's got natural ability. He can finish as well. We saw that when he came off the bench against Sheffield United. The finish was delightful, as was the touch before. It was just unfortunate. It was just a touch offside. But I thought this was a big game. And yes, he did start slightly nervously. And he actually admitted when he came on against Sheffield United that he was a little bit nervous. But I do think that this performance will have helped him. He went into a real hostile atmosphere, and he was a big part of stuff. It was the kind of the scramble he caused that led to the first goal as well. I think he could take a lot from the game. And fingers crossed, at the moment, what happened to him doesn't seem too bad at the moment on initial inspection. It was a tight hamstring, was what he was kind of saying, and he didn't want to make it worse, which was why he kind of pulled up and went down. Obviously, you could see the physio stretching out his leg as he was lying there as well, which you do not do if there's like a tear or a strain or something. So that definitely lent weight to the tight hamstring thing. And now it's a case of him being monitored this week, really, to see whether it remains tight or whether it's something that he can kind of play with. And I'd love to see him against Liverpool. I hope he's in a position to be able to play against Liverpool, because I just think his pace, and I love the fact that, yes, I did feel it was tough on Richarlison, who'd come on and done so well. But the thought of Son, Kulusevski, and Johnson as a trident, an attacking trident, is such a terrific one, because you've got two pacey players who can stretch defence, and you've got someone like Kulusevski who can just dribble past players with his strength at whim. He really can, at will even. Yeah, no, I was impressed by Johnson, and I think there's a lot more to come. And also, kind of can't rule out the fact that he's also, I think he's playing a little bit of catch up fitness wise as well. He had an ankle injury in pre-season. I think he only got about 10 days of pre-season for Forest, and he's kind of ever since is trying to get his game sharpness, but didn't have that underlying fitness. So that will come as well. I actually thought Manor Solomon did quite well when he came on for him. He looked quite bright. He worked hard, caused them some issues. Yeah, they're like I said, we kind of said this in the last pod, what an awful shame it is for even Perisic being out with such a long-term injury. But if there's anywhere on the pitch, there's a lot of options.
Yep.
It's right there. And yeah, Johnson's ability to play anywhere. We didn't know where he was playing to begin when we saw the lineup, because there'd been a suggestion that Kulusevski had been working as on the left-hand side at some points during the week. There'd been talk of maybe Johnson playing through the centre. And then when he was on the left, it was like, okay, that's fine, that's cool. And he showed that it was quite interesting, because you had two players that were more likely to cut inside. And I actually felt that in its own way caused Arsenal some problems as well. So no, I was impressed with him. And last young player for me was Pape Matar Sarr, who he just strolls around games as if he is like 34. He's just got this incredibly old head on young shoulders, and the box-to-box nature of his game as well lends itself to the role perfectly that Postecoglou wants. In one moment, he can be taking a shot at the other end or floating in across, and next moment, he's back on the edge of his own box tackling. And I think that helps someone like Bissouma as well, because Bissouma, he gets around the pitch, and again, I felt he was terrific as the game wore on. But I think he does need a runner alongside him, because there are times when Bissouma will just go, okay, I'm not going back for that. And you can let someone like 20-year-old Pape Matar Sarr make that run back. Actually, sorry, he's turned 21 now, Pape Matar Sarr. But yeah, I mean, we've spoken about Pape Matar Sarr. I won't say he was one of the stars of yesterday. I know some of the Arsenal reporters were very impressed with him, probably because they haven't seen him too much. And I kind of was trying to point, he's actually been better in other games.
Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah, he was good, but I actually think, especially like against Man U, I thought he like ran the show for long periods. He was so good. And the other one is Kulusevski. You know, he's only 23. Again, I didn't think he had a huge impact on the game, but he's just such a threat. And I was looking up his numbers. He's only played 54 games in the Premier League. It's like you kind of feel like he's been in it for an age, and he's got 9 goals and 15 assists. So he's almost got a goal involvement in almost every other game, despite the fact that he is 23. He only turned 23 this year. And I think we're a bit harsh on Kulusevski at times. I think we expect so much because of the ridiculous start to his time at Spurs. And he is just, I think there's so much more to come from him as well. And yeah, Postecoglou was raving about them all afterwards, just saying that, you know, Vic, that's his first derby. Vicario, Destiny, Van der Ven, Pape Matar Sarr, Brennan Johnson, they're all in their early 20s. Porro, even Kulusevski's only 23. It was a young team, but I'm just super proud of the experienced players we had in there as well. Romero was outstanding. Bissouma has been brilliant all year. Maddison and Sonny were just on a different level. Sorry, Maddison and Sonny was on a different level, not just his goals, although they were outstanding, but his work rate, his work ethic, that's difficult to say, was incredible. And actually, another young player, Velis, who we spoke about in the last pod, was on the bench. All this about he's not going to get any minutes the second half of the season, and there he was. And I'm told he had a really, really good week of training, where he really impressed Postecoglou and the coaches with his finishing, especially. So he ended up being on the bench. But just going to quickly move on to the experienced players. Maddison and Son, can they become? I don't want. I'm going to say his name really quietly because people get annoyed when I mention him. Can they become the new Kane and Son?
Potentially. Yeah, they're already they're already becoming that the partnership that we rely on, aren't they, going forward? Again, I think if they'd been able to stay on the pitch a bit longer, Maddison obviously bit cautious of that what looked like a nasty little stretch out of the knee in the second half. Played on for maybe 5 minutes, didn't he, before then coming off? And I think him and Son going off at the same time, I think just blunted us a little bit in terms of going really for the jugular, going for the win at the Emirates. So yeah, they've. I was part of the group that interviewed Sonny in the mix zone at Bournemouth earlier in the season, and Sonny was very, very loath because a lot of the questions were about Maddison after that performance at Bournemouth, and Son was getting all these questions about how good is Maddison, this, that, and the other. And he was very much let's not give him too much of a big head. Let's not talk all about Maddison. It's about the team, and we're all working. These players, this other player's doing this. There's not much more you can say about them, really, is there? We know how good Son is. We knew how good Maddison was when we were buying him, and yeah, the fact that is the new partnership now is amazing for Spurs. They've started like a house on fire together, and long may it continue. If they can get up to those heights of Kane and Son, then great.
That's what's so encouraging about it, is that it started so well, and you, as Maddison said after the game, they're still learning each other's runs, and he said it's very different when Sonny plays on the left to when he plays through the centre. It's a different kind of run you're looking for. Maddison's just a very intelligent player on a football pitch. Just you could see the way his brain works, and sometimes you don't see how quickly it works. You realise afterwards, oh, I didn't even see that pass, and I am all the way up here looking out across the whole pitch. How's he seen that in the cluster of it or in the middle of it all? Yeah, I'm very enthused about their partnership. I really am, and obviously, yeah, the Kane and Son partnership was, one full of goals. This may be more lent towards assists with one player and goals for the other, but yeah, it's just what Sonny needed. And do you know what? If you want to measure the efficiency of a performance, I've got the Son stats for you because this is remarkable. I didn't even realize this. Do you know he only touched the ball 18 times?
Wow.
Only touched the ball 18 times, 1-8, yet he scored twice, had 3 shots, and played 2 key passes. And he was terrific. Honestly, Postecoglou raved about him afterwards and just how hard he worked. And he was constantly running until the moment he came off. He was running and pressing and harassing every single Arsenal defender. And Postecoglou admitted afterwards, both he and Maddison hadn't come into the game 100%. They were both carrying kind of issues. I mean, Maddison is just constantly strapped up, and he's got thigh issues, got all kind of things going on. I think he maybe had a little knee complaint before he even came into the game. It looks like, I think they're going to have to scan it, his knee. Watching him, where we were sat in the press conference, we could see him walking off to his media, and he seemed to be moving absolutely fine. And from what I understand, his initial kind of feeling afterwards is it was quite positive about how the knee was, and that it wasn't going to be something that's a bigger thing. Obviously, the scan will show if there's anything more to it, and of course, I mean, we get it on a smaller scale when we play 5-a-side and things like that. But when you wake up the next morning, everything feels that little bit worse than it did in the adrenaline kind of fueled moments during the game and after. But yeah,
we could certainly do with him against Liverpool.
Oh, honestly, that's the issue. Is that there, like you say, they were blunted a bit when he. I think maybe more so when he came off. Sonny obviously had been incredible, but I think with Maddison, you lose a lot of your creativity as soon as he goes. There's no real direct replacement. And if he doesn't, for some reason, play against Liverpool, I think it's too soon. Even if Lo Celso's training again to throw him in. I think you probably do have to play Kulusevski in that
Yeah.
role, perhaps. But that's a discussion for closer to that time. I was so impressed with Sonny. What he did off the ball was as important as the fact that he scored 2 goals. He's just become a terrific captain. He is the embodiment of what they want this Spurs team to be right now. And Bissouma as well. Bissouma, what did you make of Bissouma?
Yeah, excellent. Again, I love Bissouma. I loved what he did at Brighton, and was so disappointed in how his first year turned out under Conte last year. So the real Yves Bissouma is back for Spurs. What a player he is! He's just he feels like a Rolls Royce midfielder, really. Just give him the ball, and he'll. A little bit like Moussa Dembele. I loved Moussa Dembele. Just what a player, and every player that played with him loved Moussa Dembele, obviously. And I get a few of those vibes about Yves Bissouma when he gets on the ball, and feel like he can just turn away from anyone that's marking him and just stride up the pitch with the ball, and then give it to Maddison, or give it to Kulusevski, give it to Johnson out wide. What a player. Love him to bits, really.
Yeah, he's superb. He's superb. I felt he started off a little bit shakily. There was a couple of times he was dispossessed or gave the ball away. But again, another one that just grew as the game wore on. And he was doing all the media ahead of the game as well. I think he spoke to the Sunday papers, and he also did a bit for Spurs on their in-house stuff. And he's just so comfortable. And he was talking about, because remember we had that Postecoglou admitted that he had to tell him off the day after praising him.
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember correctly, that Bissouma said it was because his car broke down, or he had a flat tire or something. That was why he was late. I was like, yeah, I think he was a little bit more. I think he was more a bit known for his late arrivals, but apparently ever since has been absolutely, on point in getting there nice and early. And he claims he's the first one in the training ground every day. I love that expression. That's, for me, is the same as he's the last one off the training pitches every day. It's like, they can't all be, because they always say this. You just imagine all these players like waiting by the line going, oh, who's going to get on first? Who's the last man? And I can't imagine that he's the first man in every day. Sure.
I have to keep an eye on those videos that Spurs put out when they arrive for training or arrive for matches, and see if he's actually the first one. Obviously, it could be edited by Spurs, but you wouldn't think they would change the order of how they come in.
You wouldn't think so. But yeah, that's... I always find stuff like that amusing. I forgot to say on Maddison as well, there was a bit of Maddison Saka darts bants going on.
You're far too old to say the word bants, Ali. Come on.
Top bants. Yes, my daughters are often telling me that. Essentially what Saka was, it was after the penalty, wasn't it? He went over and did the little kind of throw,
and then did it again for the second goal as well.
Oh, did he do it for the? I didn't realize he did it for the Romero own goal as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, Maddison kind of had his little bit ready when it was time for his club interview. He said, "Me and Bukayo had a bit of a banter and a bit of trash talking, if you like, on international duty. I got told that he did the dart celebration. He must have still been doing it when I turned him for the first goal, I think. So I'll have a little word with him in there." Yeah, he did. It was something. It was kind of fitting, I guess, that it was Saka that he absolutely turned inside out. But I like Saka. I know it's this thing that, when it's Spurs and Arsenal, you're not meant to really like any of the Arsenal players, but I like Saka. I think
I've just had a conversation this morning with one of the Arsenal lads in the office, and he said, "There's far too much I like about the Tottenham team, and I don't like it, but I like the team." And I responded with, "It's annoying, really, because there's a lot to like about the Arsenal team as well, from my point of view." So I still hate them, obviously, but
Lee Wilmot, head of football.london.
Yes, yeah.
I like Saka, and I really like Rice as well. I was like, when he went there, I was like, oh no, it's another player that I really like as well.
Yeah.
If they ever sign Jude Bellingham, then I'm in big trouble.
No thanks.
No, God, there's a player, but that's a whole other topic. I mean, Bissouma's excellent. You spoke about Romero earlier. Kind of just was going to round out the leaders of the team. I did feel that, aside from those two really unfortunate moments, I had to give him a 6 in my player ratings, and I felt really bad about doing that, because ultimately his game around those moments was excellent. I mean, he had 3 tackles, 1 interception, 6 clearances, and like I say, Postecoglou called him outstanding after the game. But there were 2 key moments, whether he meant them or not, that unfortunately influenced the game, and it's a really harsh way of marking. That's the trouble with player ratings. Sometimes it's a bit like when there's a goalkeeper that does nothing, you can't give them a good score, yet they didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
So it's a really awkward way of looking at it all. But that's player ratings. That's the fun of them. But I thought Romero was very good again. I think we've covered everyone. Even Richarlison came on and made a bit of an impact. Højbjerg came on and brought a bit of experience. Didn't do too much from an attacking sense, but brought on that attacking side to things. But I just think the key takeaway for me was that all the talk pre-match was about this being a bit of a barometer of the early days of the Postecoglou reign. What do you think we learned about Postecoglou, his methods, and where his team's at right now?
I'm not sure as Spurs fans we learned a great deal more than we already knew. I think we knew going into it that he would not shy away from the way he wants to play football. He was not going to shut up shop and try and grab a draw that way. He was going to continue playing the way he wants to play. He wants to play entertaining football. He wants the fans to enjoy watching Tottenham, and that's what they do. It doesn't matter who they're going to play against. They're going to go and play their game and trust in what they do. So yes, we saw a couple of mistakes at the back because that's how he wants them to play. That's how it's going to be in every game. We've seen that in other games already this season. He's going to go and attack Arsenal, which we did, and on another day could have perhaps come away with all 3 points. So yeah, nothing new to learn as such, but I think I said
they're further down the line slightly.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, going in, I said it last week, I think, or on a previous podcast with you. I think we're all quite happy with this season being a kind of let's get used to Ange Postecoglou's methods and let's transition, as it were, a club that always seems to be in transition. Let's transition and kind of build a platform and then go in 2024-25 as the first proper season under Ange Postecoglou. So yeah, we are much further along. I thought we would not necessarily struggle, but it would take us a while to get going, just because that's how it's been wherever Postecoglou's gone before. It takes a while for his methods to get across to the players, but perhaps we've done the Tottenham players a disservice. Perhaps they're intelligent enough. Perhaps they're mature enough to have taken.
We thought they were thick.
No, I didn't say that. You said that. They've taken these things on board straight away and have just said, yeah, okay, we can do that. We can play like that. We're happy to play like that. And yeah, much further along than we thought. And for me, it's kind of, we knew the Arsenal was going to be followed up by Liverpool next weekend. Bring on Liverpool next weekend, and let's see how we get on with that. And if we are still unbeaten after that, then there's a run of lesser teams to play against after that. We knew that Arsenal and Liverpool back to back was going to be difficult. 1 point down away from home. Let's try and get all 3 against Liverpool in a fixture that we're notoriously bad in. And then you're really looking ahead to the rest of the season and thinking what might be.
Absolutely. I just feel like Tottenham Hotspur was just desperate for Ange Postecoglou, even if they didn't realise that at the time. It was just a club that had lost its identity. It was just fearful. The players were fearful of what was happening in matches. They'd stagnated. Players weren't developing. They needed someone that could grab a hold of all of that and essentially not only bring it back, but take it to a different level. And there's so much more to go. It's such early days, but just what we've seen in such a short space of time is remarkable, really, what he's done. And I'm going to put this question to you. I've put this in my talking points, and I might be being unfair, especially because I do feel like Antonio Conte did terrific things in his first season with Spurs, took Spurs up into the top 4 when it looked incredibly unlikely when that season began with Nuno. Well, after those magnificent 3 1-0 wins at the start. I'm going to put the question straight to you, because this was something we used to always wonder as among us kind of journalists. And I think it was a feeling within the club at the time. Which players did Conte develop and improve?
Wow.
That's the issue. You make that. Everyone makes that noise.
It's hard to say. He brought Bentancur and Kulusevski with him, didn't he? From well, obviously from Italy, from Juventus. I think.
Slightly Paratici, technically.
Yeah,
But yes,
yeah,
yes.
but yeah, I think
Did he improve them, or did they just make an instant impact?
Well, they made an instant impact, of course, but you can look back at, and you never know with football fans whether they've actually grasped exactly what's going on a pitch and how good these players are. But there seemed to be a feeling that Juventus didn't need either of them, Bentancur or Kulusevski. So you could make that argument, but as you say, it could just be that they made an instant impact. Harry Kane scored 30 goals in a poor team under Conte last season. Did Conte improve Harry Kane, or was that Harry Kane always in there? I think we all know that Harry Kane was always in there. It didn't need a manager to do that. So there are 3 potential examples, but you can make a case. You can certainly make a case for Harry Kane not being improved because it's just him. And the 2 that came from Italy, you could potentially make a case for. But as you argue, it might just have been them just making an impact and Conte having nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I must say, I'm not saying that Conte's a bad coach. I'm not
Oh,
saying
no.
anything like that. His career shows absolutely otherwise. But I just kind of feel that when you look back on his short period with Spurs, it's very difficult to see players that he hugely improved. I would say that Sonny had one of his best seasons ever under him, and then had one of his worst seasons ever under him.
I would just say he's not that sort of coach, though, is he? He's not the sort of coach to develop players. He gets results with kind of players that know it and can do it. Yeah,
he can improve players, certainly. I mean, let's be honest. He took players like, oh my goodness, at Chelsea, who was
Victor Moses.
That's it, Victor Moses. Turned Victor Moses into, a Premier League title winner, and he can improve players. And again, I know it sounds incredibly harsh way, but I'm kind of using this to a point because it was something that we would constantly ask ourselves among the journalists and even, like I say, among kind of staff within the club as well would talk about this. It's like, he's definitely improved the team as a whole in that first season, but which players can you say, oh yeah, look how they play now? I mean, you could really drill down and maybe say little things like Ryan Sessegnon maybe had a better moments, excuse me, under Conte, and started to show what he could do, but obviously injuries kind of interrupted that progress. You could say that Ben Davies played some of his best football under him as well, but you're really struggling, I think, overall to look at kind of many players that massively improved. And the reason I say this is Postecoglou, we're only 6 games in. Everyone looks like they've improved pretty much. Every player in that starting 11 feels like they're in a different kind of space now. Even Maddison has come in and it feels like he's a better player than he was at Leicester. And you've got Van der Ven playing a very good level in the Bundesliga for Wolfsburg, but he's come in and feels like he's even now gone to another level already at Spurs at 22. Destiny Udogie raved about in Serie A, but it feels like it's almost like the way Postecoglou has prepared him for the Premier League and the adaptation has been as impressive, and the same with Vicario. So yeah, I mean, Antonio Conte fans may well say to me, yeah, but all those players have made an instant impact. Maybe they're the same as Bentancur and Kulusevski. That's quite right. But then I give you Yves Bissouma.
It's clear to me.
Yeah, I throw Yves Bissouma in your face and I say, look at what he has done. That is probably the biggest mess that Conte ever made, mistake, whatever you want to call it, was turning Yves Bissouma into, or trying to turn him into something he wasn't, in a rigid system, complaining about his lack of ability to like take on tactical stuff and defensive stuff. I'm sorry. You just let Bissouma do his thing. You build your midfield around that.
Yep.
And that's just pretty much what Postecoglou's done, and just infused confidence back into him. Pape Matar was terrific against AC Milan. Antonio Conte went, oh, thank you for that. Now go and stand over there. And that was essentially what he did. Whereas, Postecoglou's gone, no, this kid's going to be just a world beater. Like I say, around the club, they call him Star Boy. That's what the players call him, because they believe he's just going to be this phenomenal young player. But I'm very excited about the way Postecoglou's going with this team and what he can do. There was a nice quote from Maddison afterwards. He said, neutrals talk about Tottenham. They'll often say weak, soft, bottle it, Spursy, all that rubbish. I think the last couple of weeks show we might be going in a slightly different direction. Love that.
Not slightly different, quite a different direction.
All very different. And even
Yeah.
Arteta afterwards was asked about Spurs, and for some reason, one of the aggregators only used the end of the quote that I put out there, which is a shame because he actually was quite praising of Spurs as well. He said, I think they're a really good side. They're really well coached. You can feel the spirit in the team, the energy in them. But I think 6 games is too early for everyone to discuss essentially what they'll be competing for at the end of the season. There's a little Arteta Postecoglou link because Postecoglou, when he was Yokohama F. Marinos, when he was with them, he went to City because it was all part of the City group to watch them train for a week. And he watched a lot of the work that Arteta was doing as an assistant coach to Pep on the training pitch. So there is a little bit of a connection there. It's I think there's a mutual appreciation there. Although, don't dare tell Postecoglou they're similar. He doesn't like that. He listed a million reasons why they're not, including his age, his hair, and his waistline. I think was another one as well. But yeah, I love the fact that nobody was particularly delighted by the result, but I think a lot of them were happy by the performance. And even Postecoglou went over to the fans and did a real kind of pumped his fist into the air as if to say, yeah, we're coming now. Watch out for us, kind of thing. And then there's so much more to come. Liverpool this weekend. Yeah, we won't go too much Liverpool because we're going to maybe try and do a second pod this week and talk about that. And obviously we should get some injury updates as the week goes on both Johnson and Maddison, which hopefully the initial signs are positive and hopefully that stays that way. But it's just about Spurs being brave now. And it's about the fans being patient because not every day is going to be like this. We're going to have days where Spurs will have hiccups. There are going to be days when they're going to be punished for passing out from the back. It may happen against Liverpool. It may do. It may happen in any game. The likes of a Man City might thrive on playing against Tottenham. But I just kind of feel they're building towards something, and that's the most important thing. Right. We could probably wrap it up there, I think. I think we've covered pretty much. Is there anything we feel we've missed from the game? Anything you feel that we haven't covered?
No, I think we covered the main aspects of the game there, and went pretty much through the entire first 11 with a couple of the subs as well. So we've got Liverpool to look forward to at the weekend. So we'll discuss that on another pod perhaps later in the week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just lovely to speak after a North London derby and not be crying into our coffee and tea and actually have lots of constructive, positive stuff to talk about and not a valiant defeat. Oh, can't we pick the positives out of defeat? It was actually a game that, Spurs took a point and, like you say, probably could have done more so from as well. So, so we're going to head off now. Thank you very much for listening, as always, and hopefully we'll be back in the week to preview Liverpool and what's to come in what I think is going to be a very noisy game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So thanks again for joining me, Lee. We're going to head off now and keep an eye on for football.london for everything we're going to write. Obviously, in the coming week, there's plenty still to dissect into the game we've just had, and there's plenty more to come as we look ahead to Liverpool. Yeah, we're going to head off now. Thanks again for listening. So to grab a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Gold Guest and you can receive an extra 4 months for free. And there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the episode description box.